Switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of the business side of this, because I think for students and others who may not have a good sense of how the business of healthcare operates, there's some interesting some interest, I think, here. So you mentioned that Genomind has kind of been doing its work since 2009 or so. Long, almost 9 to 10 years ago, getting to this point, where you've develop more evidence. You've got the tests out there in the market.
Right.
Help either specific to Genomind or just more generally, help folks understand kind of that evolution of the business and sort of how you start. Maybe idea and scientific testing, and then ultimately get it to the point where there's something tangible that can be sold and traded in the marketplace.
Right. No, and I think the Genomind story would be one that's very common for any new product out there. So basically, Dr. Ronald Dezoritz has a company over in Chalfont, PA, and he obviously, as an entrepreneur, has met people along the way who would then who in addition have met other folks with ideas. So there was an investment company who asked Dr. Dezoritz, who's a psychiatrist by training, to meet with Dr. Jay Lombard, who was a neurologist. And Jay's his belief was we could improve the outcomes in depression by looking at genetics. So he had the idea, and Dr. Dezoritz had the entrepreneurial spirit and the money to say, let's give it a shot. What he asked for is, he said, look, I already have a company in Chalfont. Rather than, let's say, get more space and hire a bunch of people, why don't we incubate it within one of my existing companies so you can share their infrastructure and keep the costs down, and let's develop a product. I'll pay for that, and then if you can sell that product, we'll go from there. So they literally developed a 10-gene panel. Now we're at 18 genes. So they started with 10 genes, and they started selling it, and they literally had 3, 4, 5 employees. And then the next step is, that was successful. We went from a couple of tests to 5,000 tests a year. And then our CEO, Michael Koffler, went out and met with some investors called Claritas Capital, who then invested in Genomind. So that was sort of the next step. And then they added me as the CFO. I was employee 21. We're now at about 110 employees. So I'll call the first step is really the friends and family round. So it's usually one individual has the idea, one person has money, and then has some friends who will help invest. Then the next stage is, once you have the product and you have some cash flow and you're a real business, then a venture capital type company will come in and put more cash in so that you can grow. And both Dr. Zortz and Claritas have now funded us over these years as we've grown from a couple thousand tests to this year we're at about 40,000 tests. So now the goal is to get to profitability because we've been at it really hard for about 4 or 5 years. So we're really at that cusp of turning into a profitable entity.
Yeah, and number of different ways where one can go, from there as well. Continue to be privately held, publicly traded, seek more capital, and so forth and so on.
Right. Yeah. A lot of different options, and I've been with 4 or 5 companies in a similar situation. Some went through the IPO market. So you had the idea, the investors then take, with management's help, take the company public. We bring in a lot more cash. Some of the companies I've been with, we've sold it to a larger private equity company. And then in Genomind's case, right now, we're still trying to grow, so we're not too worried about a strategic exit. But certainly, if you look at our competitor, ShoreX, they were acquired by Myriad out of Utah. So that was how they saw their path.
Yeah. Interesting. I think for students in particular, and maybe others, sometimes we see these big companies, and you think that they just started that way, but
they all started small.
Exactly, and with an idea, right? An idea, a little bit of science, and some testing. So still kind of good to know that that's how often enterprise begins.